Welcome back to The Watch. Just as last week, I'm Charlie. Today we're going to be covering some basic terminology. Some things that I think are really important for budding watch collectors, seasoned watch collectors, everyone that is in this industry and in this sort of watch world to know. It's things that are going to help you be able to speak to people more eloquently about your watches, have you have a greater understanding of what you're wearing, and how to preserve the longevity of your pieces a little bit, and hopefully help you try to pick out some new pieces and sort of see some things from a different angle that you didn't know before. Let's get to it. All right, so the very first term that I think is really important to understand is the dial. So the dial is literally the face of the watch. It's what you see. It's what the logo's printed on, what a lot of the time the water resistance is printed on, things like that. It's where most of the appeal of a watch lies. It's obviously the first thing you see. It's the thing you look at all the time. It's usually made of some sort of plastic or some sort of metal disc that's treated and then put on the watch. The next thing is the bezel. So this particular watch is a dive watch. So what it has is a rotating bezel. The bezel is literally just whatever is outside of the crystal on top of the case. Sometimes it's flat, sometimes it's rounded. The watch that I'm wearing today, you can see that it's just sort of a standard kind of looking piece of metal. It varies from watch to watch, but that's what the bezel is. The hands are pretty self-explanatory as well. The short hand is going to be the hour hand, the long hand is going to be the minute hand, and this hand that's always moving is the seconds hand. And of course, you remember from our last video, quartz ticks at once every second. Automatic will be a much smoother motion. The hour markers are pretty self-explanatory as well. It marks out the hours. There's 12 of them on the dial. Sometimes they're triangles, sometimes they're circles, sometimes they're squares, sometimes they're metal, sometimes they're luminous material. Doesn't really matter. Now, with luminous material, it basically glows in the dark. So it gets charged by light. So when light hits it, it will charge up and then it will glow when it's dark out. Not all watches have luminous material, but a lot of them do to make them legible at night. Next up is the case length versus width. This is something that I hear a lot of people mistaking for the dial width. So it is not the width of the dial. It is literally the width from one side of the case to the other. So this would be considered the case width. This particular watch is 42 millimeters from one side of the case to the other. That is how a watch is measured. This particular one is 41 millimeters. So make sure that you understand that when you're talking about the width of the watch, the size of the watch, it's measured in millimeters and it's the case width. Now the case length is from one end of one lug to the other. So lugs are these small protruding arms that come off of the case on the top and the bottom that basically just accept the strap. Their whole job is to hold the strap in place. And when you measure case length, you're measuring from lug to lug. Longer lugs wear larger on the wrist, shorter lugs obviously wear smaller. The lug width is also extremely important. So it's the distance from the inside of one lug to the other. So this particular one is 22 millimeters. It's always measured in millimeters. If you're gonna buy a strap for your watch, I highly recommend you know what the lug width is, because if you buy a strap that is the incorrect size, it's either gonna be too big or too small. So make sure that you have a way of measuring or looking up the specs of the watch and figuring out what the lug width is before you buy a strap. Never fun to have to return stuff. The strap, of course, is what holds the watch on your wrist. This happens to be a metal bracelet. Typically when it's metal, it's called a bracelet, and when it's leather or fabric or something like that, it's generally called a strap. Kind of interchangeable, but that's kind of the accepted moniker for each. The case back is pretty self-explanatory. It's the back of the case. This particular one is a screw-down case back with a display. So a display case back or an exhibition case back is when you can see the movement inside the watch, see what's going on inside the watch. And then you have solid case backs like this one where you can't see the movement and things like that. Now, most of the time it's going to be either a screw-down case back or a case back that is flush with the case that doesn't have those little notches that you see. These notches here accept a tool that turn the case back and can open it. The other ones are just pop on, pop off. You'll see a little tab, usually up by the top, and a little tool goes in there, pops the back right off, and then pressure holds it in. The crown is extremely important, and we're going to do a whole video about crown use because it's a really quick way to break your watch if you're not doing it correctly. The crown is literally just what you use to control the watch's functions. So this one, you know, you set the time, you set the date, things like that. So that's what the crown's used for. It's also used to wind the watch if it's a mechanical. Very, very important to kind of understand what that does. So hopefully this video helped. Hopefully you learned some things you didn't know before. If you guys have any more questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll definitely respond to as many as I can. Take care. Thank you for being a part of the watch.